where I started researching it.
listening who might be skeptical of this being a possible widespread problem with O9A or others, like what can you point to show people like, hey, this isn't just some freak thing here and here or pockets of it. Like there's perhaps a more bigger network, whether it's
Right.
coalesced or not. It seems to be like there's a lot of them.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's up for debate how many members there are because it is a very secret community. And
Hmm.
you might not even call them members necessarily because everything's very individualized. So it's more of like any individual can pick up their literature and follow the steps to become an adherent kind of superhuman type of person, right? And they move up through the ranks, but it's all individualized. So it kind of there's not like a big group of people with hoods and robes like chanting in
Right.
churches and stuff. And I would also kind of say, like, I guess a couple years ago when I started talking about this, a lot of people did kind of think that I was crazy. But as time has gone on, more and more mainstream news has picked up on it. And now it's just a fact. It's a fact. There's a Wikipedia page on it. You
Right.
can go to all of the sources on that and find tons of articles that have been made in the mainstream about this group. So it is real.
Wasn't there a guy in the army who was part of this O9A?
Ethan Melzer, yeah,
What was
that's
his
an
deal?
interesting
Yeah.
situation. He, I had this whole conspiracy behind this guy at first because when this news first broke, we were following it really closely. And then right after he got charged and sentenced, we went to Google and I tried to type in Ethan Melzer because I was looking for an article, and I noticed that I couldn't find a picture of his face anymore because I was making a video and I couldn't find a picture of his face anymore. And I noticed that it was showing all these other people's faces instead. And it was almost like Google had said, hey, we need to remove this guy's face from the search results. So when you clicked on one of the pictures, what you found was that it was actually a related article that was in the article itself, right? You know how, like, if you go to an article, you scroll down and be like related
Yeah.
articles. Well, they had like pulled thumbnails and like replaced them. And so there were all these people popping up when you posted his name or put his name in, but you couldn't find his picture anywhere. So they like really did kind of
They scrubbed.
go on a scrubbing spree and tried to take his picture offline, which is weird.
What was he trying to
Um,
do?
he was working with a group called Rape Waffen, which was a neo-Nazi, satanic neo-Nazi like cell, I guess,
Hmm.
splinter cell. And what he was trying to do was organize an ambush on his army branch. So he was actually giving information to people who he thought were his comrades in O9A, who turned out to be informants. And he thought that he was giving information to people to give to ISIS or Al Qaeda to actually attack his troops. So he
That
was
was
planning
not,
an ambush.
that was in Europe? Was he on a
No, it was
base? Oh, it
here.
was here.
Yeah.
And how did
Mhm.
they, so once, like, how does that get to a point where they're like, okay, he's going to get delivered the bombs, like, or where, how does it end with him? Like, who reports him, and what do we find out about the people involved behind the scenes? Like, how many are there? How many are feds? Is it like the
It
Whitmer
was
thing?
really so we don't really know for sure because he took a plea deal, so never actually went to trial, which is a very
Hmm.
common thing here. Like people be like, "Oh, he pleaded guilty, what a piece of shit," but they don't realize how strong armed these people can be to take a plea deal, right? And also, we don't see the trial evidence if we take a plea deal, we don't get to see it, so
Hmm.
we didn't get to see a lot of that information. But I remember there was an article about how his lawyer had said in court that almost all of the people that he had talked to were Fed informants or LARPers, not even people who weren't even really part of. He basically said he was in like a Telegram group and none of the people were actually terrorists. It was just him and at least one informant. And then one of the kids who had been giving information to was pretending to be a Canadian paratrooper, but in reality, it was a 16-year-old kid who'd just gotten released from a mental hospital who was just pretending to be a Canadian paratrooper.
Wow.
There's just a lot of strange, like it was really weird. Like he wasn't actually plotting like he thought he was. Like and one of the people who was definitely pressuring him to give very specific information. And this is pretty obvious, right? Because you look at the chat logs and it'll be like, I'm thinking about, what if we committed a terror attack by doing this and that? And the person would be like, Yeah, what kind of guns do you have?
Oh,
Oh yeah,
great.
well, when would you do this? Oh, well,
Right.
like how would you do it? So they're like they you could see the informant trying to get him to say enough that they could actually move in
Right.
and press charges. However, in this case, I do think the guy was pretty serious. I think that he
Really.
was probably going to hurt some people. So whether or not you think that the means justify the ends or you agree with that stuff is kind of,
It's very difficult because I don't agree with the
yeah.
Fed napping, you know?
Right.
They were
Yeah.
planning some crazy stuff, and a lot of that was written by feds. You know, what I've seen from the court documents that came out,
Mhm.
it was like a Northwoods type situation. And I think about that quite a bit. So we'll go back a bit because I want to hear more about Nama and what your relationship was with her and what you were saying you found out of she was what did you call her? Not she wasn't a federal agent, but
So I think that what she actually does is so she does work or did work for a DHS, Department of Homeland Security funded NGO. That NGO was a countering violent extremism NGO, which basically, if you followed, I and have a Substack where I talk about this extensively, by the way.
where
The
can they find that?
certain
Where can people find that?
it's BX rights. That's my Substack
Cool.
handle. And yeah, I can give you after
Yeah.
the stream too. But basically these grants kind of go to these groups. So well, like so the government goes, hey man, there's a limit to how much we can actually just go into chat rooms and surveil people,
Mm.
right? There's a limit to what the government can do. So they use these NGOs to do it and they call it preventing violent extremism or counterterrorism. And they train people like Nama to be threat assessors to see what a dangerous individual looks like so that they can escalate it to the police. But the problem I had with that, though, is that at the same time, she had her podcast. And her podcast was basically serving as an advertisement for the same forum. So rather than trying to keep people away from this ideology, it would seem like what she was doing was kind of softening the public's perception of it, kind of trying to whitewash it, while also, basically just providing an advertisement for that forum. So that's when I started to talk to her and be like, hey, I don't really agree anymore with some of the stuff you're saying because I've been into that forum and I've seen what's going on there. And I think the Fed should shut it down. Why is it still up? Like this is a
How
nightmare,
how did
right?
she whitewash that? Like, what would she
Um,
do to make it sound not so bad?
well, she would have the founders of the forum on her stream, first of all.
Okay.
And just she was just talking to them like they were buddies,
Hmm.
right? She would talk about incel mass shooters or incel killers. And she would kind of be like, well, it's not really their fault. And like, oh, well, they didn't have any connection to the forum. Obviously, the forum is perfect. It's angelic. No violence has ever been caused by the forum. And she said that many times.
Wow.
She's frequently lied and said that there's been no actual cases of violence connected to the forum, which I was able to pretty much immediately debunk that and show her several examples. So she was just lying about it, right? This is a terrorist forum, really is.
Right.
And she's making it seem like, she's defending it. She's defending it from people like me who come out and say, hold on, this is something we should look at. And so I called her out for that. And that's when she basically revealed to me that she was a threat assessor. And she told me that the forum was a honey trap and that I should just leave it be. And I wasn't okay with that. Because I think that a lot of these mentally ill kids, they get drawn into that community. Maybe it's via Twitter,
Mm.
like I hate women. I'm gonna watch some, we joke around about it because DHS has targeted they've targeted like whatever podcasts, for example. They've
Really?
targeted Fresh and Fit. They've targeted Rollo Tomasi with government funds
Hmm.
meant to suppress them,
Wow.
right? And I exposed that, and that's on my Substack, and they've all talked about it, right? But the thing is that they're not actually going after the website or its owners. In my opinion, they're drawing in these kind of mentally ill, largely autistic loner types who are already angry and sexually frustrated. I mean, is there anything more dangerous than a 20-year-old male who's angry at society because he can't get laid?
Right.
That's a pretty
Meanwhile,
dangerous state.
yeah, society
Yeah.
is there's porn everywhere. I mean,
Right.
even like on
Yeah.
billboards to some degree, you know, and on
Yeah,
TV
and
and
it's making it worse. That
yeah.
all kind of goes into their mental state, and they use that in that forum to be like, oh, that's why women are all whores, and this is why it doesn't matter if they live or die, and their lives are worthless. There's a lot of like, as far as a cult goes, that I do feel like it checks a lot of the boxes of a cult. There's a lot of otherness, right?
Hmm.
You come in here and it's incels versus everyone else.
Right.
If you ascend and get a girlfriend, I mean, people, you're basically blacklisted, and people, hate you. They discourage these guys from actually overcoming.
Were they respectful to
Um,
Nama, like on her show?
some of them were, yeah, but also some of them were just obvious maniacs,
Hmm.
like pedophiles. Really, like
Hmm.
I've gotten really angry at her for having some of these people who just promote pedophilia as a solution to inceldom. It's very common. Oh,
Wow.
you can't get a girl your age. Well, guess what? A kid can't say no to you. That's the level of depravity that's
Yes.
going on there. Like, this is
Disgusting.
not something that I would consider free speech. This is like just something that's abhorrent and needs to be burned
Yeah.
to ashes.
And it's
So,
I would say it's prevalent, you know, like seeing all these different people, like normal looking people in society who engage in the pedophilia stuff
mhm,
is, I mean, I did
it's
that
everywhere.
it's everywhere. I did that story in Ohio about these guys, and it was shocking, you know. And those guys were just like low, like some of them were low level. There was one firearms instructor and a fireman, but some of those guys were just like a manager at a Pizza Hut, but still unassuming, you know. And
Yeah.
people think of evil as like the
Mhm.
creatures in your nightmares, but unfortunately they look like humans, and
Yeah.
they're I think they're possessed by demons, but when
Well,
when
that's a good segue into the 764 stuff, I
oh,
guess.
perfect. Yeah, let's go.
So aside from all of the mass shooting and stuff, we'd also been seeing signs of the O9A in a group that was revealed by the FBI in September of 2023 as being called 764, even though it's actually a group of splinter cells and various groups that are, so to call it all 764, sometimes the criminals will get angry at you and be like, that's not technically correct. And you're like, nobody cares. Okay. We're just going to call it this for simplicity's sake. Nobody gives a shit. Okay. But basically, it's a group of people who abuse and extort and sexually exploit children and young adults. They find them via Roblox and Minecraft and other online communities and they target these kids, and they convince them to do all sorts of horrible things, from cutting their abusers' names into their bodies, sexually exploiting themselves, killing their pets on camera or like on live calls. It's like what they're trying to do is to just get people to do the worst things imaginable, and then have it on camera associated with your name, your gang name, so
So they
that you
have to
can be
film
like,
it.
I'm the most evil person
They have to
here.
film the act, and they give it to the person on the other side of
Well,
the
no.
screen.
So here's what will happen is, like, let's say there's like a 15-year-old girl who's
Hmm.
kind of like in some of these Minecraft communities,
Hmm.
and they target her and they groom her into like sending some sexually explicit material. And then they use that to extort her and say, if you don't do more stuff for us, if you don't cut my name into your chest and take
Wow.
a video of it, if you
Wow.
don't kill your cat, I'm going to come kill your whole family.
Wow.
And they'll dox the kids. They'll find their real addresses. They'll torment their families. They'll do swatting attacks on them.
This has happened more
Um,
than a few times. Like
yeah,
there's instances of like multiple instances of this
it's
type
a
of thing.
network that's, I think, been estimated to have probably close to 200 people in it.
Wow. And is that
And
in America? Ever anywhere
all over
else?
the world,
All over the world.
all over the world. I would say that I've seen mostly American cases, but that's
Mm-hmm.
just because that's who
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, they're all over the world. And, so we had been kind of seeing this horrible content. Like when you see it, you know what it is because there's satanic imagery in it too, very heavy occultist imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So like you'll see like occultist symbols on the wall in blood next to like a dismembered cat or something, right? And it's just really the worst. It's the worst things you can't imagine worse stuff, right, than this.
Yeah.
And so we'd been noticing some of this really graphic content pop up in Discord channels, but we didn't really know what it was. wasn't until the FBI came out and made a press release about this group back in September of 2023 that we started to really understand who it was and that it was connected to the Order of Nine Ankles.
How are they connected?
So that's something that I've been researching lately, a lot, because I guess some of the mainstream understanding isn't technically correct. But you know how we talked about how O9A, like they want to collapse society and they want to corrupt our youth and they want to just promote evil things, and they infiltrate groups to get people to do evil things. And even better, if that group is already doing evil things and you can get in there and push them to start, using satanic imagery, or making it even a little bit more sinister, maybe something a little bit more evil, right? And so that's kind of what we've been seeing, is that these people who were adherents to O9A had sort of ingrained into this group and started pushing more of a satanic aesthetic. And also more accelerationism. Now what we're seeing is that those people have realized that the pedophilia angle got way out of control. And now it's like, people are getting arrested left and right. And so now they're trying to they come into my DMs all the time and they're like, stop saying we're pedophiles. We've moved away from that now. Now we're just terrorists who want to, commit terrorist acts. I'm like, why are you in my,
They hit you up a lot, it seems like.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've gotten a lot of really credible threats.
Yeah.
When I started covering this, and one of the people who was sending me all of those threats was arrested, in the UK. It turned up to be an 18-year-old in the UK.
Wow. When did that happen?
A couple months back in April, I think, is when he was arrested. His name is Cameron Finnegan. He went by the moniker Acid. And he was a friend of Kyle Spitz, who we kind of talked about. Did we talk about?
Oh yeah, no, but we should get to that right after you tell more about this guy. Like, what did they find out about him?
Well, so this guy was the one who was basically telling me, you have 30 minutes to take down all of your posts about me, or I'm going to have somebody go shoot up your house and rape and murder your daughter. So it was like pretty serious stuff that they were saying.
Wow.
So, obviously the feds were involved with that because I'm the victim of that. So I'm actually one of the victims of 764 myself.
That's crazy.
But they ended up arresting him, and what they found was that he did have child exploitation content on his devices, which they all almost do. But also he had been planning to murder a person that he knew in real life. Like, he'd been plotting a murder of some homeless man who he'd had beef with. So like he actually got charged with planning a terror attack because he was actually planning a murder.
Is it O9A or 764 that you murder as part of like the initiation? Is that part of what you're talking about with the self-harm stuff?
764 doesn't really have an initiation. It's more of just a group of really, really misguided kids hurting other kids. And then sometimes the people who are hurt become perpetrators. And it's just a really ugly, corrupt cycle of abuse. The best explanation I've ever heard from anybody about why they were doing that was just straight up to corrupt the youth. We want to corrupt American youth. That's what we want to do. And promote them doing horrible, sinister things, right? So the O9A itself, they do sometimes discuss human sacrifice, and the idea of human sacrifice to them isn't like at an altar or like with a young virgin or something. It's actually like they call them opfers, and what they do is they look for people who they think are of weak character or have some kind of other personality trait, and so then they convince themselves that it's an acceptable offering because they're trying to, what they call culling. They're trying to cull all of the weak people. They call them mundanes, right? Us normies, basically. They could justify killing any of us by way of like, well, they didn't believe in the sinister doctrine, therefore their personality, trait made them an acceptable offer. But they particularly go after bad people, people who've done bad things. And they also go after journalists and people who are reporting on them because they've justified that in their minds as being like, they're stopping the sinister activities, and so therefore they're willing sacrifices.
Interesting. With you said opfers, like what does that stand for? Do you know?
I don't know. So the person who made this cult, his name is David Myatt. He's like an 80-something-year-old man at this point, I'm pretty sure, and he's like literally still on Twitter you can summon him by just talking about him, and he'll come up on one of his alts and start trying to like guide the narrative around himself. So you just imagine this like
Candyman?
old cult leader. Yeah, just like this old cult leader who has nothing better to do now than just like search his name on the Twitter search function to see who's talking about him. Like, it's
Wow.
kind of sad.
Whoa.
But anyways, this guy was an old Gladio operative. He was actually associated with is it column 88? Is
88.
that
I think that is
yeah.
one of those, yeah.